Well, we're here at the Secular Student Alliance Conference in Little Rock, Arkansas, talking to Christian
Yes.
from?
The University of Texas at San Antonio.
All right, great. And glad to have you here, Christian. And you grew up in San Antonio?
Yes.
And tell me about your background. How'd you get into the Secular Student Alliance and into maybe more into the beliefs that brought you into the Secular Student Alliance?
Well, a couple of years ago, I went to this, I guess, like fair at UTSA for different clubs.
Oh. And SSA was there?
Yeah. SSA was among all the groups there outside. I was kind of bored a little bit, and I kind of wanted stuff to do. I don't think I joined the history club yet, or if I did, I think I just kind of found it a bit boring.
Okay. Were you already then at that point attracted to you already had a secular worldview and you kind of knew that's what you were interested in?
Oh yeah.
And did you have that when you were in sixth grade? Or how did that come about? Was your family all secular or?
My mom is secular. My dad too. Although my mom, it was because she her family was once a part of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were shunned for I think having a child out of wedlock, I think it was.
Uh-huh.
My father, I don't know, he didn't really talk about religion.
He's not alive anymore?
He's still alive.
Oh, sorry, you used the past tense, so I was a little. All right.
Yeah, I just don't see him too much.
Okay.
I'm trying to fix that, but yeah.
Are your parents divorced or?
Yeah.
Okay.
My father, I guess when it comes to religion, he's a bit more of a mystery. I don't know what his parents taught him to be as, if they did at all.
Yeah.
I don't think they did, but.
For your mom, let's just say, when you were growing up, would you actually use the term secular, or was there just no term really used to describe what you believe? Because obviously there's a Christian or two in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Right. So there's people around you who are Christians. You're probably in the minority, I would guess, in terms of a religious outlook in that context. So, how was there a way to sort of describe yourself that you remember, or that you commonly used if someone asked you what you thought about religion or God or whatever, or no? I'm really just curious. I'm not.
Well, before a certain point, I didn't really know any of the terms really.
So if someone was a Christian, you knew you weren't Christian.
Yeah.
If someone was Jewish, you knew you weren't Jewish.
Yeah.
But you didn't really have any sense of what you were.
Exactly.
Okay. There wasn't any definition or title or name or identity or anything.
Nope.
Okay. And so you must have thought sometimes about that.
Thought?
You didn't say oh yeah, we're atheists.
Well.
Right? Or maybe you did.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't really know the term at that point, I'd say.
And there was no, so the term, forget the term, I was just curious. I was truly just curious, because I didn't really have a way of describing myself for a number of years. And I don't know, I know I didn't believe in God. Mm-hmm. And I may have used the term atheism here and there, but it's not like I said that a lot, that I remember. I remember more just being interested in trying to find out the truth about the world and stuff like that. But when God came up, in your background, in your home or whatever, or was it just, what would you say, or what would you think?
I probably didn't think much of it, really.
Did you think, all these people are crazy around me? They think there's a God and there's no God. Or did you not really have an opinion?
Somewhere between no opinion and it just going one ear and out the other, really.
Yeah. But at some point, you started thinking more like you had an opinion?
Yeah.
And when was that?
That was probably a couple years, a couple years before the 2016 election, somewhere around there, 2014-ish maybe. I was big into the news at that time because it was like one of the only few channels that my mom and I watched together, since we don't really have much in common as far as TV goes. And so after like a while, I started watching like news on YouTube from a guy called Kyle Kulinski from the Secular Talk podcast.
Oh, okay.
And he talked a whole lot of like religious issues and political issues, especially like religious issues back then. And
So that was sort of like he was giving voice to things you were starting to think, or at least he was shaping your thinking in some way?
I'd say more shaping my thinking.
Okay. So did you like celebrate Christmas when you were young?
Like,
I don't know, you had presents and a Christmas tree and stuff?
Yeah.
And was there like, oh, Santa brought this, or no?
Yeah, Santa, yeah.
Okay, and you thought, like, at one point you're like, Santa's real, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so your mom was just doing that for fun, I'm sure, and at some point you're like, oh, Santa's not real, like every other kid.
Yeah.
But you didn't have like a bunch of other things where you were thinking there's something real out there.
Yeah, not really, no.
No. Okay. When you heard people then talk about church or the Bible, did you just think of it as kind of like it's just all like the way, I mean, I don't know. What would you think?
Boring.
Yeah, boring. That's a good word. But not like these people all believe a fiction, or you didn't, at some point you started to think that, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, when you were young, it was just all boring.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so you're listening to this podcast, and you're hearing ideas about religion. Is that where it really started to kind of take shape? Like these people all believe a fiction is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at that point, you had heard stuff about the Bible more generically, but this guy, did he talk about specific things that were problematic or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you then have Christian friends around there? Jewish friends, Muslim friends? I don't know.
If they did, they didn't talk about it.
They didn't talk about it.
I didn't really have many friends, period. So.
Okay. And in college?
Well, I mean, during high school, in tail end of middle school, I do have a friend that's Christian. I think he's taking like theology classes at like SAC or something. I think. I don't get to talk to him much anymore.
Okay. We didn't have many conversations about these kinds of things.
No, not really.
So then how'd you end up like here? Because you seem, the way you're talking, you seem fairly laissez-faire, about these things. You weren't that passionate one way or the other, it sounds like, unless I've misunderstood. At some point you became more passionate, I guess?
I'd say I still consider myself to be pretty laissez-faire when it comes to issues of religion, but like the way like things are going right now in like politics and whatnot, that's kind of like slowly edging that part away.
Meaning what? Why is that?
Well, I hear so much about like abortion being banned and whatnot for religious reasons, and like I'm thinking that the religion's like worse the more I'm thinking about it when it comes to these issues.
Okay. And that's been in the last like 2 years, 4 years?
Yeah, 2 or 4 years.
Okay. So Trump, as a president, wasn't making you feel more this way. It's been more like since COVID or something. Because Trump was president before all that.
Yeah.
And of course, he's not like a typical practicing Christian, I think we could say, probably.
Yeah.
A lot of his supporters are, but I'm saying he himself does not seem like a typical
yeah.
Baptist, let's just say.
Yeah, when I would see like Trump trying to do like religious stuff like
Yeah.
during his presidency, it'll be. I felt it seemed like so clumsy and stuff. Like
Yeah.
he's clearly an actor and he doesn't really care about this stuff.
Yeah.
And so
That's my impression as well. It seems more,
yeah, more like a clown than anything.
you know, me seems more a put on for, because politicians are always trying to make people like them and support them, and he has a lot of religious people who support him, and so he's particularly on the religious right,
Yeah.
and so he tends to try and do things that favor them. I haven't really looked that deep into it, but that's been my impression as well. So, do you then? You must have then have had some kind of like beliefs, things you thought were important, like abortion,
Yeah.
or pro-choice, or whatever, I guess. That's now affecting your view of religion.
Yes.
And did you come to those views, like pro-choice, just on your own? You think, just growing up, or?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Is that the only big thing that you feel like what I assume is the religious right is you feel is like an actual threat, that you are now more passionate about these issues?
Well,
Or
like
SSA?
like the general separation between church and state.
Okay, just that. So separation of church and state is one thing, and then also abortion, but you just see that as under that umbrella, right?
Yes.
Okay. I can always consider this really hard, like this kind of a discussion, this part of a discussion hard, because I always think, for me, like whatever someone's moral values are, whatever they are, even if you're an atheist who's pro-life, right? Your values, you're going to think, I want the culture to be supportive of my particular values, whatever they are, right? Mm-hmm. And whether they're religiously informed or not, they're still your values, and you would prefer those values be predominant. Now, you might think, a lot of people will say, particularly in America, I have my values, you have your values, and the great thing about America is you have the freedom to live out your values, I have the freedom to live out my values, right? So
yeah.
we don't have to force a law on everybody for our particular value. But then there's other values we feel like it enters into the area of law, right? For example, if someone says, well, my value is that people shouldn't be able to drive, 100 miles an hour whenever they want, because that endangers people. So I feel like there should be a law, and that's for everybody. And then someone else might say, no, I want to drive 150 miles an hour, and you shouldn't be able to tell me I can't, But obviously that becomes something that affects a larger group. It just ends up being a discussion of law. And then they're against one another regardless of their religious view. Abortion is sort of like this because the pro-life people think, hey, this is a human life inside a person. That's their belief. And, actually it's not a belief, that's a fact. It's a biological fact. It's not a cat life or whatever. But they believe it's a baby or whatever their belief is, and that it's inviolable. Nobody should have the right to take the life of another human being, even if it's in the womb. Okay, that's their belief. Forget whether that's a belief anyone else agrees to. That's their belief. Someone else will say, no, the mother has the right to take the life of this embryo because it's her body, or whatever. But you can see how that immediately becomes an issue of law, because this person is saying, well, hey, look, you can't take the life of the baby because that's not your life, it's someone else's life. So so that enters into the area of law, just like we have laws against murder. Like you can't have the murder someone else because that's their life, So even if, what I'm trying to do is not argue, you understand, one way or the other. I'm trying to show how this obviously is going to become an issue of law, like a debate about law. So what do you do with that? Right? Because obviously a person over here, whether it's religiously informed, might be a secondary matter. They might be pro-life regardless of their religious beliefs or whatever. Someone over here might be religious, but they're pro-choice.
Well, like the thing is with everything you can always find exceptions, right?
Yeah.
Like for abortion, like maybe after like a certain matter of time where like the fetus kind of turns into like a baby, like I don't know when like when its heart starts beating, or when it can feel pain, stuff like that. And even then, like exceptions for the health of the mother, right?
Yeah.
Like if this baby is going out and if like something's wrong with it, and we know that it's going to like hurt or even kill the mother,
Yeah.
then yeah.
Well, just for clarity, I really wasn't asking like your view of that particular issue.
Oh, okay.
What I meant was that you were telling me you got more passionate about SSA, right? And because of the last couple of years, you feel like people's religion, and I think you mean the religious right, isn't that
Yeah.
it? They're trying to impose their value system, I think, is through law,
Yeah.
right? What I was trying to say is, aren't both sides trying to have their particular value system encoded in law, right? If someone wants, like there's people who are politicians, right, who think there should be the Congress should pass a law that declares a woman's right to choose regarding abortion. Well, then obviously they have a private value, but they're trying to encode it in law, right?
Yeah.
Someone else might have the exact opposite view, and they're going to try and encode it in law. So is this just in other words, the religion part of it seems kind of irrelevant to me. That's what I'm trying to get at. Aren't both groups trying to get their value system encoded in law in that case?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this case, I guess you would be just on one side of the moral debate, and so you're wanting your particular view to be the one that gets encoded in law. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hard. I mean, it's like an obvious. Some of these things are very hard, right? Like how to work through them, even ourselves. You know how. Is there any other issue that got you here that brought you to like an SSA conference? Like maybe separation of church and state in another way, because that seemed like the big thing for you.
Yeah, like how our money says, "In God we trust."
Ah, okay, yeah. So things like Pledge of Allegiance or like the public acknowledgement. So this one's also sort of hard for me because so we have the Constitution and then we have the Declaration of Independence, which are both pretty sacred documents to Americans. And the Constitution does not have the word God, has the word religion, for the purpose of saying we should not establish the religion, right? The Establishment Clause, okay, which I think is really good myself. I think it's a very good idea. In fact, separation of church and state is an idea that came out of the Reformation from the reformers like John Calvin and so on. It's kind of interesting that it was Christians who first promoted the idea. But the Declaration of Independence explicitly references the Creator and says that our rights, our fundamental rights, are endowed by the Creator. And so the way I view like history is that America has always had this tension, that there's a belief in God and that God grants to us individual rights that no other person can violate. And then there's also this view that the government cannot establish religion, whatever the Establishment Clause exactly means. And when I read Thomas Jefferson's letter, the famous letter, where he referenced a separation of church and state, I'm not talking about the Establishment Clause, I'm talking about his I don't know if you're familiar with the history, but there's a letter specifically he wrote where he talks about the wall of separation.
Was it one of the Federalist letters?
No, it's not one of the Federalist. It's a letter regarding the Baptists in Connecticut who felt that they were being persecuted or marginalized by a different denomination. And so Jefferson wrote, but the denomination had ties into the government. And so they were using their political power to marginalize the rights of the Baptists within the culture. And so Jefferson wrote a letter saying there needs to be a wall of separation between the government and the church, because you can't use the government's power to force one particular denomination's view on another denomination, right? And yet Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence saying that our rights come from God, right? So it's like that. My point is that tension has been there from the beginning of how that works out. And In God We Trust is just another tension. Jefferson was against the idea, I think, of having a day of national prayer, but I think was it Hamilton or whatever? There were others, right, who were in favor of that. There was like a tension among those founding fathers over that. So, in other words, my point is, it's been there since the beginning. That debate's been there since the beginning among the people who signed the Declaration.
Yeah, it's just taken different forms.
It's taken different forms, yeah. Like, it's never not been there. And so the fact that they couldn't agree, it's no surprise that disagreement continues, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it still is continuing. The famous Alabama case about the Ten Commandments, that were in the courthouse or whatever. It's like, yeah, this has just been around since the beginning of America.
Yeah.
Do you think, do you know the history of, have you read up on the history of it?
I know, some things about the separation of church and state, and, some points about different religious issues.
Yeah.
Before the U.S. was, officially a thing. I think it was, Maryland was pretty Catholic. I think it was that state.
Oh, yeah. There are two real important things. There was a Supreme Court case about busing in the 1930s, which is worth looking at. And the other one is John F. Kennedy's famous speech when he was running for presidency about his religion, because he was Roman Catholic and there had never been So his speech has also had a real influence on the way we now tend to think about separation of church and state. So I just say those are four things that you could look at that are really fascinating. I'm not prejudicing how to understand them, but those are four key things that are worth looking at for trying to be educated on the whole idea, the big picture sort of idea.
Yeah. I do think that there's one more big point: the Cold War.
The Cold War?
Yes, because it was the godless atheist communist versus the moral Christian, I guess, U.S. and France, whatever.
That's excellent. That is definitely has played a huge part, because when I was in high school, the way the debate was framed was, hey, we're the God-fearing people who do good in this world, believe in freedom. And those other people in that other country are godless atheists who are trying to ruin the world.
Yeah.
That was the way it was talked about.
And if I remember correctly, In God We Trust was put in during, I believe it was the Eisenhower administration.
It was.
Before that, I think, what was it in place of something in Latin, I think? I
do think, well, the A Pluribus Unum has been around, but
yes.
But I teach Latin and Greek, but and yes, I think you're right. I mean, yes, the Cold War played a role because Marxism was, Marx was explicitly atheistic. Religion's the opium of the masses and stuff. And so I do think you're right. There was a reaction within America to try and frame it as from the political standpoint, the cultural standpoint, as a religious divide between the Soviet Union and America. But probably it was also the reality that the vast majority of Americans were religious, did believe in God, and that the Marxist ideas, were explicitly atheistic. Even though there were obviously Russians who still believe in God, they were trying to indoctrinate the idea of atheism within their school systems and so on. So that was one of the cases in history where, even though America had a separation of church and state, in terms of, the government is not there to promote Baptists or Judaism or any particular religion. At the same time, America was predominantly religious and theistic and actually Christian. Most people were identified as Christian. And so that became just a part of the way people looked at their difference with the Soviet Union. And I always think of politicians as not really as less the cause of things and more of a reflection of where the country is. I may not be right about that. Just my general instinct is that politicians want to be elected again. So if they're going to be elected again, they want to be popular. So they don't want to go out and say a bunch of stuff that most of their voters don't like because they won't be elected again. So if the politicians are, saying we should put in God we trust, on the, make that a part of the lingo of who we are, it's because that's convenient, it's helpful to them politically to frame the debate that way and support their policies. And probably most people, there probably wasn't much controversy. Do you know if there was a lot of controversy?
I don't know.
I have not really looked into that because I know roughly when it happened, but I've not really read it. I'm sure there were some that were voices of opposition, but I'm guessing the vast majority of people
didn't know or didn't care.
Were totally happy
Yeah.
to put in God we trust and saw themselves as very different from the Soviet Union, the Russians, the evil Russians. And by the way, it's kind of interesting that Democrats now tend to be a little more anti-Russian than some segments of the MAGA crowd because Trump is supposedly a friend of Putin, So it's kind of interesting that Democrats who tend to be more secular tend to be more like the Russians are bad and evil, Putin is evil, and it's actually Republicans who are Trump followers who are like, hey, Russia's, not as bad as you think, I guess. I don't know.
They like Putin's autocratic policies.
I don't know. It's just sort of an interesting kind of switcheroo, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Whatever's causing that, it's just fascinating. Anyway, you're right. I think it's a good point that the Cold War did play a role, some role. I don't know if if you took In God We Trust out, would you also advocate removing the language of the Declaration of Independence?
Well, the problem,
the reference to the Creator.
Yeah, well, the problem is that as far as I know, the Declaration of Independence isn't really a legal document, but the Constitution is. Like, the Declaration of Independence was more a middle finger to the British monarchy.
Yeah. Well, I guess when we say it's not legal, I mean, in one sense, it's almost above law because it declared our independence. I don't know how that couldn't be considered some sort of legal. I know what you mean by like influencing the Supreme Court decisions and so on.
Yeah.
But either way, and obviously the document is not the same as printing money in one sense. I just mean like it's there. There's no like removing it.
Yeah.
Because it's a document that was for one time in history and it's still like highly regarded. We do make copies of it, and I bet the government prints copies of it. So, you know what I mean by that? Like, I'm sure they print copies somewhere and have them in at the Library of Congress or museums or something. So, do you think that gets a pass? I guess in a way.
I think so because it's such an like you say, it is a very influential document, and there's no real reason to take it out really, because it shows the context of back then, back when a lot of it was divine rule of monarchs and such.
Yeah, it has a historical value for the time, so it's no reason. Let me ask you this. Here's a question. What if someone said, we're going to change In God We Trust. We're wiping that out. And we're replacing it with endowed by our Creator. Literally the words out of the Declaration of Independence. I've never thought about this until this moment. I'm curious.
Well, it does sound a bit more vague, I guess. Like, instead of just God, maybe
it's Creator.
One
versus God. Yeah.
One could take it as like goddess or general idea of deity, really.
Yeah. course, God's pretty generic, right? Because Muslims believe in God, Jews believe in God, Hindus, some sects of Hinduism believe in God.
Yeah, but there is like the argument that it's more, I guess, Abrahamic religion focused,
Sure.
it, and Creator isn't as much.
Sure. I wonder, do you think, I'm just truly now just curious about this, would it create more controversy or the same controversy among the secular communities in America like SSA? Would they be happier with Endowed by Our Creator as a group, or do you think it'd be the same? What's your hunch? It's just a hunch. There's no way to prove it right now.
Probably the same, I'd say.
I was thinking the same. But that's kind of an interesting challenge, right? If because it's literally right out of the Declaration of Independence, so you can't really claim it's not relevant to America's very identity, and yet it still is saying something about, not just saying something about a creator who exists, but a creator who grants rights, endows us with rights, which is the more I think about that, that's a stronger statement, that our rights are endowed by, because people talk all the time, like the right to abortion, the right to whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But if the Declaration is declaring that's a right granted by the Creator, if you put that on the coinage, I actually think, first of all, I think the religious right would probably, if I had a hunch, they would object to it. Yeah. Because it's just a knee-jerk reaction. People they're trying to take God off the coins, like I think they would do that, unless Trump and the Republican Party in Congress were the ones who said, we want to change our coins to honor both God and the Declaration of Independence. If they were the ones who promoted the idea, then I kind of wonder, they might say, yeah, okay, we're good with that. I don't know. But sometimes it seems like it's that petty, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's just who the idea comes from.
A lot of small scale issues.
Yeah, sometimes it seems like that. What do you do stuff for SSA on campus?
I mostly help out getting stuff getting stuff from our lockers and putting it out.
Trying to promote the cause. Do you try to do it like an event or something?
Sometimes we do events. Usually it's just tabling.
Tabling, like a table out, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Do people try and come up and proselytize you, evangelize you,
Sometimes.
More on the Christian side than other religions?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how's that go?
Usually I'm not there, but usually
okay.
Usually it's kind of funny.
Funny?
Yeah.
Yeah. Annoying?
A little.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would see. Have you ever read the Bible? Like parts of the Bible?
No.
Quran?
No.
No. Do you think you will at some point, just out of curiosity, or no?
Maybe.
I mean, I would say most people probably haven't read most of important things that have been written that have shaped the world.
Yeah.
Probably most people haven't read it, unless it's like in a class, where they read it. Well, really enjoyed the conversation. Glad you were willing to come to this table and and have a conversation with me. Hope things go well with you at the conference.
Yeah, me too.
All right.